Ever just kind of space out and find yourself standing in the kitchen? How'd I get here? You know?
Happens to the best of us.
Went in for like a glass of water, right? And suddenly, bam, I'm at the pantry, hand in the cookie jar. It's like my brain's on autopilot or something.
It's the power of habit, my friend. Those tiny little decisions, those automatic actions, they really add up.
It's kind of wild when you think about it, which is why we're diving into Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit today.
Great book. He really breaks down the science behind those autopilot moments, why we do what we do, and even more importantly, how we can change it.
I gotta admit, when I first picked it up, I thought, a whole book about habits, like brushing your teeth and making your bed. But then I started reading, and wow, mind blown. Seriously, the stories, the research, it totally changed how I see, like, the inner workings of my own brain.
He's got some incredible stories in there, like the one about Eugene Pauly.
Yeah.
It's a guy who, because of some brain damage, completely lost his ability to form new memories. Imagine, every day it's like waking up for the first time. You can't remember what you ate for breakfast, who your friends are, sometimes even who you are.
Oh man, that's gotta be, like, one of the scariest things I can imagine.
It's heartbreaking. But here's the thing. Even with this severe memory loss, Eugene could still learn new habits.
Really? How is that even possible?
Well, for example, he could go for walks around his neighborhood every day, and he would find his way back home without a problem, even though he couldn't consciously recall ever taking those routes before.
So even though his conscious memory was gone, his brain still held onto these automatic pathways, these ingrained actions.
Exactly. This was huge for researchers. It showed them that habits operate on a different track in the brain than our conscious memories.
Like a separate highway in the brain, bypassing all the conscious thought and decision making.
Think of it like this. You're a rat in a maze. First time in, you're running around like crazy, bumping into walls, totally lost. But eventually, you stumble on a tasty piece of chocolate hidden in a corner.
Ooh, chocolate.
Right. Now, next time you're in that maze, you're probably going to remember that chocolate and make a beeline straight for that corner.
And the time after that.
Yeah.
And the time after that. It's like you're hardwired for the chocolate corner.
Exactly. And with each repetition, something interesting happens in your brain. Your brain activity actually shifts. You're no longer consciously thinking about the maze. Your brain develops this automatic pathway to get to that reward.
Autopilot to chocolatey goodness. Okay, so this is starting to sound a little too familiar. Fast food jingles, anyone. Are you telling me our brains are basically wired to crave rewards and then automate the behaviors that got us there?
You got it. Think about McDonald's. The consistent restaurant design, the same menu layout, even the predictable taste of a Big Mac, it all creates this sense of familiarity, a cue that triggers your routine.
Leading straight to that salty, satisfying reward. Okay, I'm seeing the pattern here. But back to Eugene. How do his daily walks fit into this habit loop idea?
Even though he couldn't remember the walks themselves, his brain was still picking up on cues from his surroundings. Maybe the sight of a particular mailbox, the feeling of the uneven pavement under his feet.
So those cues triggered the routine, the walking of the same path, and the reward.
The feeling of accomplishment, the satisfaction of a walk completed. That's the reward that reinforces the loop. Even with a damaged memory, Eugene's brain had hardwired that habit loop cue, routine, reward.
It's incredible. And honestly, a little bit unnerving, right? Like how much of our behavior is actually driven by these unconscious habits and what happens when those habits aren't serving us well? That's what I want to know.
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to the fascinating world of the craving brain and the golden rule of habit change.
So we've got this habit loop figured out, cue, routine, reward. But the real question is, how do we hack the system? Like, how do we break those bad habits or even better, rewire them into something positive?
That's where the craving brain comes in, right? Duhigg, he tells this fascinating story about a guy named Claude Hopkins, a marketing whiz back in the early 1900s, who basically created the craving that launched the whole toothpaste industry.
Wait, seriously, toothpaste. Tell me more about this.
Okay, so before Hopkins, hardly anyone brushed their teeth. It just wasn't a thing. But he had this genius, albeit maybe a little manipulative insight. He realized that everyone has this natural film on their teeth, right? And he figures out how to make that film, that feeling, into the cue for a brand new habit.
Okay, I gotta know, how'd he do it?
Picture this. Cities plastered with ads for Pepsodent toothpaste. And the message, run your tongue across your teeth. Feel that film. That's what makes your teeth look dull and invites decay.
Oh, wow. Talk about tapping into people's insecurities, right? But did it actually work?
It worked like a charm. See, By highlighting that film,
Yeah.
that feeling, he made people hyper aware of it. Suddenly, everyone's walking around feeling that film on their teeth, and they're craving that clean mouth feeling that Pepsodent promised.
Hmm.
Sales just exploded, and the daily toothbrushing habit, bam, it was born.
So it's not enough to just offer a reward. You gotta make people crave it, right? That's pretty genius, actually. But what does all this craving stuff have to do with actually changing our habits?
It's all about understanding that craving
Hmm.
and then, well, kind of manipulating it. Remember Febreze, they first marketed it as an odor eliminator, right, for smelly homes.
Right, right.
And it tanked. Why? Because people with smelly homes, they often can't even smell the stench anymore. So they didn't have a strong craving for a solution.
It's like those families in the book, the ones who couldn't even smell their 9 cats.
Exactly. So Febreze, they totally shifted gears. They reframed the reward, focusing on that amazing fresh scent after cleaning, something people actually craved.
Hmm.
In sales, they doubled practically overnight because they tapped into that craving.
Okay, this is making a lot of sense. But what about like those really tough habits to break, like addiction? Does this craving thing still play a role?
It's huge. Take Alcoholics Anonymous, for
Hmm.
instance. For years, we thought overcoming addiction was all about willpower,
Right,
just saying no.
right, right.
But AA, they recognize the habit loop at play. They understand it's not just about white-knuckling your way to sobriety. It's about rewiring those habits. They help people identify those individual cues. Could be stress, loneliness, certain social situations, things that trigger that urge to drink. Then, they offer alternative routines to satisfy that craving for relief that the alcohol once provided.
So instead of hitting the bottle, you call a sponsor, you go for a run, you attend a meeting, something that brings that same sense of comfort or connection or whatever it is that the person is
You
creating.
got it. And that brings us to what Duhigg calls the golden rule of habit change. You can't just erase a habit. You got to replace it.
Mhm.
Keep the cue, provide that same reward, but you insert a new routine.
So like with AA, the cue might be that feeling of stress, the reward is relief, but the routine shifts from drinking to, say, connecting with their support system, and that's where the power of belief comes in, doesn't it?
Big time. The feeling of community, that shared purpose you find in groups like AA, it creates this powerful belief that change is actually possible. And that belief, it can be incredibly motivating, often more powerful than willpower alone. But there's another layer to all of this. It's these habits, Duhigg calls them keystone habits, that have this ripple effect. They can influence not just our individual behavior, but entire organizations, even communities.
Keystone habits, huh? Okay, now we're talking. Let's dig into those. Keystone habits. Sounds kind of like, I don't know, the name of a self-help guru's private jet or something, but you've got my attention. What are these habits that can supposedly change everything?
All right, so picture this. You're the CEO of this struggling aluminum company where you're focusing your energy, profits, stock prices. What if I told you the key to turning things around was actually worker safety?
Really? That's where you'd start. Seems a little, I don't know, counterintuitive.
That's exactly what people thought when Paul O'Neill took over Alcoa back in 1987. He made worker safety his top priority, even told investors this is the metric to judge the company's success by.
Oh, I bet that went over well on Wall Street.
Not at first. But O'Neill, he was convinced that focusing on this one keystone habit, worker safety, would create this ripple effect throughout the entire company. And guess what? He was right.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. So how did focusing on safety turn everything around for Alcoa?
Well, to improve safety, they had to overhaul their processes. They implemented new communication systems, started using rigorous data analysis, and here's the big one. They empowered employees at every level to identify and address hazards. This wasn't just about, reducing accidents on the factory floor. This was about building a culture of awareness, of responsibility, of continuous improvement.
So it's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. Worker safety was the tide, and it lifted everything. Productivity, morale, the whole 9 yards. But how do we figure out our own personal keystone habits? Like, are there any clues to look for?
Absolutely. Think about those habits that have the potential to set off a chain reaction. Positive changes in other areas of your life. Take exercise, for example. It's not just about physical health. Studies show regular exercise can boost your willpower, it can reduce stress, even improve your sleep patterns.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that hitting the gym more often could actually make me better at, like, managing my time, being more productive at work?
It's definitely possible. You start prioritizing your well-being, and it often spills over into those other areas of your life. Another great example, something as simple as making your bed every morning.
Okay, gotta confess, I am so guilty of letting the bed stay unmade most days.
I get it. Seems
Yeah.
trivial, right? But that one small action creates a sense of order, of accomplishment that can really set the tone for your entire day. It's about building that positive momentum.
Interesting. So these keystone habits, they don't have to be these monumental undertakings. It's more about the ripple effect, the chain reaction they create. But can these small changes really have like a bigger impact out in the world? Can they influence entire communities, for instance?
Absolutely. Dewey talks about the power of food journaling, right? Researchers found that even just asking people to track their food intake once a week led to significant weight loss. And not because anyone was like telling them what to eat. It was the act of journaling itself. It increased their awareness, and that, in turn, helped them make healthier choices overall.
So the awareness becomes the keystone. That's fascinating. But here's the thing, if our habits are so ingrained, if they bypass our conscious decision making so often, do we even have free will? Like, where does personal responsibility fit into all of this?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And Duhigg, he argues that belief is a crucial factor in habit change. Remember Alcoholics Anonymous? It's not just about those new routines, it's the shared belief, finding strength and support in that community. The belief that change is possible, that's incredibly motivating.
So it's not just about individual willpower. It's about the collective power of believing in something bigger than ourselves, right? And we see this everywhere in Alcoa, in AA, even in those big historical movements like the Montgomery bus boycott. When people unite around a common goal, incredible things can happen.
Exactly. And when you combine that deep understanding of the habit loop, the cues, the cravings, the rewards, and you tap into that power of belief, you can create some incredible positive change
Yeah.
in your own life and in the world around you.
So it's not about being a robot, just perfectly executing some pre-programmed routine. It's about taking control, understanding the science, understanding ourselves, and using that knowledge to really shape the lives we want.
What if that key to unlocking your full potential, what if it really does lie in understanding the hidden power of those daily routines?
It's a powerful thought. And a perfect note to wrap up our deep dive into the surprisingly complex and empowering world of habits. Thanks for joining us.